Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are putting Thanksgiving in our rearview mirror. We have Christmas in our sights, smack dab in the middle. We still have one playoff team still alive. We lost one last week, unfortunately, and we will talk about what happened in the region final round of the football playoffs. And we will talk about the team that will play in the state semifinals coming up this week here on the podcast. So we will start with the team that we lost. That would be the Whitesboro Bearcats. They were eliminated in the 3A Division I Region 1 final game at Globe Life Field against district rival Brock. The all-district matchup went against Whitesboro as they came up short 49-14. This was a game that saw Brock take a 28-0 lead at halftime, and it was 42-0 in the third quarter before Whitesboro was able to get on the board. We talked leading into this game about how it was a district matchup, that Brock had won 42-21 back in the middle of the season, and although the score is very similar to that as a final, it was a much different path to get there. Last time, this game was tied at 21 at halftime before Brock pulled away, and the Eagles flipped that script, jumping out to the early lead and really dominating, especially defensively, to kind of impose things on Whitesboro, to maybe kind of let them know, hey, this time is going to be a little bit different than last time, and so they jumped out early. Whitesboro really struggled to put things together. And you look at this game and how it played out, and there were 4 or 5 plays obviously early that made a difference. The very first play that Whitesboro had from scrimmage was an interception deep in their own end that Brock was able to turn into a touchdown on inside the 10-yard line. Whitesboro had a punt blocked that ended up being a red zone possession for Brock. They turned that into a touchdown. And there were just little things throughout the game. Whitesboro had a chance to get an interception that, if it is intercepted, is probably going to be a pick six. If anything, it's going to be Whitesboro ball in Brock territory, down 14-0. And unfortunately, that gets deflected again and falls incomplete, and then Brock ends up going down and scoring. There was a lot of that in this game where you could look at those 4 or 5 plays and say it's just not going to be your night when things like that go against you. And of course, against a team as good as Brock, they're going to make you pay, and they did. Coming off the game that they had the week before, you could kind of get the sense that they could kind of smell the opportunity that was there for them to finish off this season the way that they think it's going to be finished off. And Coach Fagan said as much after the game. He said when we talked about some of the mistakes and falling behind to a team like that, he specifically said falling behind to a team that's probably going to win a state championship in 2 weeks. So I think after Brock beat defending champion Jim Ned, everybody looked at them as the favorite. And I think people gave Whitesboro a puncher's chance just because the first game was so close. But unfortunately, things kind of snowballed after the first quarter. When they fell behind 14-0, and they just could not put together any sort of drive until it was too late. In the end, Jake Hermes, he had 9 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown, and then Clay Hermes had a touchdown run in the final minute for the other touchdown for Whitesboro. But despite all that, obviously a great season on the whole for Whitesboro. I know it's disappointing in the moment to have a chance to get to the Final Four, playing, to extend the best season in school history. They had never been to this round of the playoffs So just getting here is a monumental achievement, and they're going to have some key players. I think you could say it's sort of 50-50. They're going to have to fill some holes. Obviously, when you look at the offense, they did it. 2/3 of the season they played without their starting running back Grayson Ledbetter. He'll be back, and Matt Harper at quarterback is going to be back as well. The biggest question is going to be at the receiver spot because they lose so many of those guys, that were seniors. So that's obviously going to be the main focus, because when you look at three of the top four receivers were all seniors: Tor Nagelstad, Jake Hermes, and Sean Shares. So you've got Jay Sanders back to lead whatever group you have to put together and round out that unit. But obviously you lose three guys that were key parts to that, and a couple of those guys were starters on defense as well. I think that's more where you're going to see a lot of the attrition for some of the spots, and that's something that you look at some of the games that Whitesboro had, guys making plays on defense, holding. We're going to talk about Gunter, and Gunter is obviously the last team that's still standing, and Whitesboro is still the 28 points that they held Gunter to. That's Gunter's season low. So that says something about this Gunter defense and how good they were. And then you have a lot of guys in that group, at all levels of the fields, that you're going to have to replace. I mean, there are some guys that are coming back. Sterling Garton is a guy who, as a junior, played a big role this year. Jay Sanders is obviously a guy who's a two-way contributor. But up front you lose a guy like Paul Velton, you lose a guy like Jacob Smith, you lose a guy like Nagelstad and Shares in the secondary. So there's going to be some changes, and that's life, especially at the 3A level. The interesting thing, and I've said this with every team that loses because it is a realignment year. The big question mark for Whitesboro is going to be, do they come back to Region 2 and join an Eastern District based on realignment? This week, as we tape the podcast, the cutoff numbers have not been released, but they're supposed to be released sometime this week to determine who's in what classification and who is in what division when it comes to football. And so we'll know for sure who is in 3A Division 1 and 3A Division 2 to kind of get a better handle on that. I have a feeling that the district that they are currently in, this one that has Brock and Pilot Point, Paradise, Peaster, Bowie, Boyd, who am I missing? I'm missing somebody off the top of my head and I can't remember who it is. But this big district, Ponder's the other one. This district is probably going to stay the same. It stayed the same from 2 years ago when it was put together, with the exception of Peaster getting added in the second year. They threw them in after the fact, after the district had been released, because they decided to jump in. But for the most part, everybody else has stayed the same. Now Brock is moving up, so that is obviously a big change. Even if this district stays the same, Brock has obviously been atop the standings. They're obviously, they're playing in the state semifinals. Who knows what they're going to do? They're usually one of the best teams, not just in the region but in the state. So them moving to 4A Division 2 is obviously a big change. But the question with Whitesboro is going to be, do they end up staying in what this district is minus Brock, or could they potentially slide back in this direction? We assume Howe is going to drop down to Division 2, and so if that is the case, is it possible that they slide Whitesboro back to come east and maybe join that district. Although I think the travel is probably going to be a little. They may actually be less advantageous if they were to come in, because they'd have to go make those trips with Pottsboro and Bonham out to Commerce and Mount Vernon and Mineola. So that is something to watch with them. If they stay in the region, I think they're going to be, a potential trendy pick for to have this success again because of the pieces that they have coming back. But also, like I said, if Brock moves out and you're third place, you can say, well, we have a chance to move up at least to second place. And Pilot Point was the team that finished above them, and that's a game that went to double overtime between these two teams. So you can compete with a team that would probably be considered to be one of the favorites, and you're coming back into a district that you beat everybody except Brock and Pilot Point. So that could help as well. So obviously we're gonna have to see for sure what happens with their district. But all in all, like I said, it was a great season for them to make it this far. To be able to put up on the wall that they are, region finalists, the first time ever, to win 9 games, which is something that's been very rare for the program as a whole, regardless of how far you go in the playoffs. And honestly, it says a lot about this group because they were sitting at 3-4. After those back-to-back losses to Brock and to Brock and Pilot Point, and then and they reeled off 6 wins in a row. The 3 wins that they needed to go from outside of the playoffs to getting the 3rd seed and getting as best seed as they could get, and then obviously winning 3 rounds in the playoffs. Before losing against Brock. And like I said, if Brock goes on and wins the whole thing, and if Gunter goes on and wins the whole thing, here's a team that's sitting at 9-5, and their 3 losses, 3 of their 5 losses would be to teams that won the state champ, that were the 2 best teams in 3A, because one's going to win Division 1 and one will win Division 2. So obviously a lot to be proud of, and a lot of guys that are going to be back to kind of build off this experience and know that this is possible, and a lot of people are probably going to expect another deep run as well for the Whitesboro Bearcats next season. So unfortunately they are out, and that leaves us with the Gunter Tigers, who won their 6th straight Division 3A, Division 2, Region 2 title. They did that by beating Holiday 35-14. This was the 3rd time in 4 years that these schools have met in the region final. And obviously, if Gunter has won 6 straight region titles, they have won all of these matchups. And again, this was as was the previous meetings, and as really has been this whole run in region finals for the 6 straight years. This was another game that was not that close. I know the score, 35-14. It's a 3-touchdown game, but this was a 28-0 game in the middle of the 3rd quarter, and it took until the final couple minutes of the 3rd quarter before Holiday got on the board, and then once they did, to make it 28-7, Gunter went back up 35-7 before Holiday scored their final touchdown to close out the scoring. Just to run down a couple of the stats in this one, Hudson Graham, 22 carries, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He also was 9 of 11 passing for 143 yards and a touchdown. Ashton Bennett, 13 carries, 62 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Ethan Sloan, 16 carries, 73 yards. Cole Lemons, 4 catches for 62 yards. And Cannon Lemberg had 4 catches for 61 yards and the touchdown there. Gunter really controlled this game. They ran the ball 69 times. They had 23 first downs. Holiday only had 4, and you look at, like I said, you look at that final score and you say, 35-14. That looks like it was a halfway decent game for much of the game. I put this in a story, put this in a tweet to just kind of show how how this game went. So Holiday only ran 38 plays. Gunter ran 80. So Gunter had basically a 2-1 play advantage. So out of those 38 plays, Holiday gained about 260 yards, roughly. Out of those 260 yards, 211 of them came on 3 plays. Holiday had a 76-yard pass that was a catch and run that ended up with no points because Holiday went for it on 4th down and turned it over on downs. Then they had an 80-yard touchdown run, the first touchdown, and then the last touchdown came after a 55-yard run, got them inside the 10-yard line as well. So those 3 plays got 211 yards. The other 35 plays that Holiday ran gained a total of 47 yards. I mean, there was a stretch where it was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, the long play, turnover on downs, and then 3 and out, 3 and out. Holiday only had the 4 first downs, and literally those 3 plays were 3 of those first downs, and they had one other possession that had a first down in it. Everything else was a 3 and out. So and we talked about going in. That was the thing in this matchup. Before this last week, Holiday had never scored more than 13 points against Gunter, and now they got to 14, and obviously that was not going to be good enough because Gunter has done just enough in this matchup. Now, this was a second time this season that Gunter was held below 41 points. The aforementioned game against Whitesboro, the 28-7 game that they won, that's the only other time that they've scored fewer points. And the 21-point margin matched that one as the 2 closest games that Gunter has had all year is those 2 wins, winning by 21 points. So Gunter is now 14-0, and they advance to the 3A Division II state semifinals, and they will take on Lubbock Roosevelt, who is also 14-0. Roosevelt won Region 1 36-14 against Abernathy, and that was an all-district final there. And, of course, we mentioned a couple podcasts ago that Abernathy was the team that knocked Canadian out of the playoffs. Not only was Canadian the defending state champion, but they were also trying to win Region 1 for the 6th straight season, and that deprived us of Gunter Canadian Volume 6, which, no offense to Canadian, I think myself and a lot of other people are sort of happy about, just because seeing the same opponent, I know seeing Holiday for the 3rd time in 4 years, I'm sure wasn't real exciting, and having played 5 straight years against Canadian, regardless of how competitive that was, because obviously it was competitive, they each obviously won against each other at certain times and would go on to win state championships and go on to play in state championship games. I just think that there's something to playing somebody new, just not, getting excited about that. I'm sure if Canadian had come out and they were playing Holiday instead of Gunter, I'm sure they would say, well, you know what, that's regardless of how beneficial it is for us, or maybe it's not because they were obviously able to beat Gunter. It's just nice to play somebody else. And this game is going to be at 7 o'clock on Friday night at Abilene Christian University, which is also a fun little side part to this because, as many Gunter fans know, this round has seen a lot of trips out to Wichita Falls, Vernon way, and this is obviously it's a relatively new facility since Abilene Christian moved up to the Division I level, and it's a different place, a different atmosphere, and I guess against a new opponent. So I think that's a fun little part to that as well, is that we're not looking at going to the same place. You just kind of get in that routine of same location, same team, same round, with the big stakes at hand. So So that's the info on that. Looking ahead just real quickly to next week, obviously, because that is for the state championship. The winner is going to play the Franklin-Wascom winner at AT&T Stadium next Thursday night, also at 7 o'clock. And I think those are the two teams that everybody expected to come out of Region 3 and Region 4. On that side of the bracket, I would say probably if Canadian had made it, I think if you talk to a lot of people before the season, if you would have said, hey, it's going to be Canadian against Gunter and Franklin against Wascom, they probably would have said, yeah, I think there's a pretty, I don't know if there's an 80% chance or a 90% chance or a 100% chance that that's going to be the Final Four. I think a lot of people would have picked Gunter, Franklin, and Wascom to get to this point. Lubbock Roosevelt is the newcomer, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But so that's the look ahead. So if you want to pay attention to that, I think obviously Franklin has been the number one ranked team all season. They just won their region final 66-0 against Poth, and I think they are, regardless of who they face, they're probably still viewed as the favorite to win the whole thing. I think a lot of people at this point are thinking it's going to be a Franklin-Gunter matchup. That's 1 versus 2. That's been 1 versus 2 all year. I think that's what a lot of people picked before the season, that it would probably be Franklin against either Gunter or Canadian. But I think, obviously since Gunter's been number 2 the whole time, they would be the top challenger for the people that think Franklin might be the best team in the state. So that is obviously next week. To get there, though, Gunter's going to have to deal with Roosevelt, and this is an interesting matchup for a couple reasons. One, so we have Gunter. Everybody knows what Gunter's doing. They're undefeated again. They're in the state semifinals for the 6th straight year. You're on the 3rd senior class that has their whole time in high school. All they know is Gunter goes to the state semifinals, Gunter wins championships, Gunter plays for championships, all that sort of thing. And then on the other side, you have Lubbock Roosevelt, who has never been this far, had never been to a region final, had never been to the region semifinals, and has never really had, just in terms of wins, this much success. This senior class, when they were in 8th grade, Lubbock Roosevelt went 0-10, so they were joining a program that did not win a game. Their freshman year, Roosevelt went 1-9, and then they won 3 games the year after that. They actually made the playoffs and went 3-8, and then last year they went 8-3, and then this year obviously they're 14-0. So they almost have as many wins this year as the previous 4 seasons combined. Or the previous 5 seasons, because that's be 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. That's the previous 5 years. They won 15 games in 5 years, and they have 14 wins this year. So this is, I don't know if you want to say a true underdog story, because obviously they've made the playoffs the last 2 years. They did win 8 games last year, made the second round of the playoffs. But this is obviously, totally brand new for them. But they had never won more than 9 games in a season. They'd actually only won 9 games in a season once before. They've been an 11-man program since 1963. So from 1963 to now, this is only the second time that they've won at least 9 games in a season. And the last time they won 9 games in a season was 1986. So this is totally new, uncharted territory for that program, even though they've been in the playoffs the last couple of years, compared to, this is Gunter trying to win its 3rd championship in 6 seasons. They're trying to make the championship game for the 4th time in that stretch. They've been here, like we said, the last 6 years. So there's that aspect to it. The other thing that I find interesting about this matchup is Lubbock Roosevelt is a running team. They are a flex bone offense, and they hardly ever pass. So if you're looking at them as a team, So last week they beat Abernathy 36-14, and they ran the ball 53 times. They did not throw a pass. For the season, so they've played 14 games. Their quarterback, Alex Trevino, has thrown the ball 16 times in 14 games. He's 8 of 16 for 121 yards with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. So basically, they average 1 pass a game. And then, which you would expect if you're running the flex bone, maybe not to that extreme, but that is that is what they want to do. They are, even though it's a different alignment because Bells runs the slot T, but for Gunter fans and people in the area, if you've seen Bells play, that's what they do. They want to run the ball 90-something% of the time. Bells obviously has shown they're a little more apt to throw if they have to, or they're willing to take a chance to throw compared to something like this. But you're going to line up against them, and it's going to be run. So they pass it maybe 1 time a game, and they are averaging. I'm going to pull it up here, so I get my my total right to show you exactly how stark a difference is. They run the ball 46 times a game on average. They throw it once. That's that's what they do. So they're going to keep it on the ground, and they're going to do it with essentially a 3.5-headed monster. They have 3 guys that have rushed for 1,000 yards. All 3 of those guys have at least 19 rushing touchdowns. The quarterback, Trevino, leads the way. He has 1,878 yards and 33 touchdowns out of 196 carries. Next up, they have Nate Gensler. He's the leading back, or running back, or however you want to slot back, depending on the alignment. He has 1,400 yards and 19 touchdowns on 166 carries. And then the third guy is J.J. Diaz. He has 54 carries for 1,052 yards. So that's a whopping 19.5 yards a carry. And he also has 19 rushing touchdowns. And then there's a third guy, Octavio Rodriguez. He has 99 carries for 735 yards and 8 touchdowns. But obviously they have a big 3. And then there are some guys they work in after that. So they run the ball. That's what they do. That's what they want to do. And the interesting thing, obviously, about that is the one thing we talk about with this Gunter defense is they will stop the run. And if you are a one-dimensional team where they can focus on that does not normally bode well for your ability to do well against Gunter because they've been so good during this stretch running the ball. Now, the thing about the flex bone is it's option football. There's motion. It's designed to get guys in the wrong gaps or going the wrong way or assuming this is going to be a pitch, but we give it to the up back, or we're giving it to the up back and nobody's playing the pitch. It's very much, and I haven't talked to Coach Fazell yet, but I'm sure when I do, he's going to say the same. A lot of what I'm saying is you've got to follow whatever keys you're supposed to follow. You've got to trust that everybody's doing the other stuff that they're supposed to do, because you have to do what you have to do when they start to run these plays, because if you don't, they will and they catch you. That's where the big plays happen. That's where that's why you have guys that are averaging 9.6 yards, 8.4 yards, 19.5 yards, 7.4 yards a carry. It's because they're getting opponents in the wrong spots, chasing guys that don't have the ball, running away from spots where the ball is going. So it's I think this is really interesting because the teams that can throw the ball against Gunter have more of a chance. They have, you have to be able to respect the pass and what it can do getting big plays. Roosevelt doesn't do that. I mean, they literally do not want to pass. And so I think this is, it's very simple to say it's going to boil down to how well they handle this rushing attack, but that's what it's going to be. If Gunter does what they normally do against people, swarming to the football, not giving up huge chunks of yards for the most part, then you have a chance. Now this is an offense that is averaging almost 50 points a game. They scored 14 points in their first game. They won 14-6 back in the season opener. And they've scored at least 34 points in every other game. They've scored at least 50 points 9 times. So they have had a relatively easy time putting up points. Obviously, we talked about Gunter Holiday this deep in the playoffs. That was one of Gunter's closest games. The Abernathy game, we said, was a rematch. That was 58-56 the first time, and this time it was 36-14. So while Lubbock Roosevelt did a better job of shutting down Abernathy, Abernathy also shut down Lubbock Roosevelt in the rematch to hold him to 36. So I don't know if things don't go Roosevelt's way, how they handle it, because a lot of their scores have been very lopsided. They're not very close. That Abernathy game that they won 58-56 and the game they won in the opener 14-6 against Amarillo River Road, those are the only games that they've had that are closer than 13 points. Every other game they've won by at least 13 points. They had a win that was 34-21. They had a win that was 44-11. They had the win last week 36-14. Those have been their other 3 closest games. So not particularly close. A lot of their other scores, they're in the 50s. Other people are, 14, 19, 0, 6. So I guess the interesting thing is going to be is if they get behind, one, I don't know if they can even attempt to pass because they don't normally do that. So if you can get, a 2-touchdown lead on them, how does that change their approach? And can they even change their approach because of the way they run their offense? But also, they haven't really seen a whole lot of resistance to get to this point, except for a couple of games. And so if you get that early, does that affect their confidence? Does that affect their ability to do that? And you could probably say that about Gunter too, to some extent. The game against Dublin I thought was a good sort of test in the first half because that was pretty close. The score against Holiday, it was 21-0 at halftime, but it was one of those that talking with people in the press box, it was one of those games that it was 21-0, but it felt like 35-0. And you also felt like if Gunter didn't score in the second half, they were probably going to win just based on the fact that Holiday was literally, doing nothing when it had the ball. So I could see that from that aspect as well. But that's probably the 2 biggest things is that you have a team that does not want to pass. Gunter's strength has always been stopping the run, and if there's no real threat of that, does the way the flex bone potentially trip you up? Are they able to do that enough? Against a seasoned Gunter defense, and like we said, you're dealing with the experience of one side that this is all they know, getting to the state semifinals, and Lubbock Roosevelt is doing this for the first time. I'm sure their coaches are saying, hey, we're the underdogs. Just let's go out and see what happens. Let's leave it all out there. Nobody's expecting us to win. Look at all the things Gunter's done in the last 6 years. That sort of thing. Or maybe they're just saying, hey, we're 14-0 too. Why not us? Because we're having a special type of season, and maybe try to carry that momentum into it. I will point out too, just as a fun little note, we are this deep in the playoffs. There's only 17 undefeated teams left. 16 of the teams are 14-0, and there is a team that's 12-0. I assume that's probably COVID related, with games getting canceled early on. But there's 17 teams that are undefeated. Obviously, this is a matchup of 14-0 versus 14-0. There's only 3 other matchups. There's only 4 total that are left in all of going down to 6-man all the way up to 6A. There's only 4 matchups this week in the semifinals that are undefeated team versus undefeated team. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking at it from that point as well, because you have 2 teams that haven't lost, and obviously someone's going to come away with a loss this week. So I'm really excited to see what happens. Obviously, if Gunter wins, they'll be playing for another state championship next week. And I just like the fact that it's somebody new. I like the fact that it's an intriguing it's an intriguing matchup, just from the X's and O's, as well as the newcomer on the block, and it's now this is old hat for Gunter. To have this be year 6 in a row. A lot of people are expecting this type of thing to happen, and that says a lot about Gunter too. You get to a point where everybody expects you to do this. Everybody assumes it's going to happen, but it doesn't just happen. You have to go out and win all these games. You have to win. Non-district is non-district, and as Gunter has shown, they can lose a game in non-district and still win a state championship. That's not an issue. But you've got to win your district to get to the right side of the bracket potentially, and obviously you've got to win. You've got to win 4 playoff games just to get here, and to do that year after year after year, when everybody's gunning for you and everybody is expecting you to do the things that you're doing. A lot of people can take that for granted, and a lot of people can just kind of, you just think it's going to happen. But you got to put in the work, you got to put in the time, you got to put in the effort. And no matter what happens, just the fact that Gunter has gotten this far again says a lot, for a group that, was obviously really motivated about what happened last year. We talked about, I think, in the season preview, they got beat very badly by Canadian. Now, obviously, Canadian went on to win the whole thing, so you lost to the best team. But that game was not close, and I know that had a lot of people unhappy with the way that game went. And obviously, Gunter's been taking it out on a lot of people this year with the way that they've really dominated from start to finish, and they're 2 wins away from really putting a cap on. If you want to rank the teams in this run, that this group has a chance to really stake its claim as potentially, if not the best, obviously one of the best to do this. And I know that they're maybe they wanted to see Canadian at this point just for revenge factor. But I still think it's going to be a pretty good matchup when they take on Lubbock Roosevelt at 7:00 on Friday at Abilene Christian University. So that's a look back at last week, and a look ahead to what Gunter's going to get into on Friday night. We'll still do a podcast. We'll do maybe just a general wrap up next week. / we can talk about the cutoffs and some of the snapshot follow up before we get into realignment in February. Those numbers should be out by the time we have the next podcast, and either we'll be previewing Gunter in the state championship game, or we'll be wrapping up the final game of the Texoma 2021 season. So hopefully we have a state championship game to worry about next week. For all you fans, maybe it's not just Gunter fans. If other fans from the area are going to make that trip, please be safe going out to Abilene. It's gonna be a long day. You get back late at night. The weather's apparently going to be good, all things considered. So there's that. There's that aspect of it that I guess we don't have to worry about, considering it's the middle of December. But definitely be careful making a trip out to Abilene and back. Probably, I'm sure a lot of people are going to try to do that all in one day. I know I will. So let's all be careful out on the road. Everybody get safe and have a good time, and we'll see what happens. So again, we're drawing to the end of another season. Hopefully we have one more week, regardless of what happens, and that'll be it. And then we'll look ahead to realignment, and everyone will start looking at schedules for 2022 and what they think they can do and all that sort of stuff. But hopefully we'll have Gunter still playing. Thanks for listening as always, and we will talk to you next week regardless. Hopefully we've got one more game to talk about next week on the podcast.